Oh, so is it a thing where they could have run out the clock and then they wouldn't
Yes.
be at the end of the game?
Correct.
For the front door cover. Listen, as long as you don't put me as Eric Lindquist, I'm okay. Because that would be offensive. But if we're just going to make me, I'd much rather be myself with my name spelled incorrectly than Eric fucking Lindquist. Say that much. we all hope. Yeah. What's happening, everybody? It's time for another Stokastic NBA Live Before Lock show. As you come in, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And apologies, there ended up being a little bit of confusion about when the show is going to start today. By the way, that does not only go for the viewing audience, that goes for us as well today, because I was looking at the NBA slate ahead of time today and wasn't exactly sure what time that the slate was going to lock, but there was only 3 games on Saturday night. There was the earlier game, and I thought there was a chance that we were going to have FanDuel and DraftKings lock ahead of the Mavericks-Raptors game. So we had actually originally scheduled shows for Live Before Lock to be in that time frame. But then when that wasn't the case, got pushed back. Then it's Saturday night. We only have certain people available. But Matt LaMarca always available to help out. So it was the two of us who were jumping on here to break down the slate. So apologies once again, but I'm going to make it up to you guys. Matt, how are you doing?
I was doing a lot better before Alabama just ran that one in against me. Had them had Auburn plus 22, which is now pushing, but I also took them live, so it's not going nearly as well as 5 minutes ago. But you know what? We're here now. We'll transition to some NBA, and everything will be okay.
And is how much time's left in the game? I don't know anything about college sports.
That would be 1 minute and 35 seconds left, so we're not looking good.
Well, you never know. They could face a prevent defense on this drive and go down the field really quick.
They could, but Auburn seems like they're pretty content to just run this one out. Right. Cadillac apparently doesn't know that you're supposed to try to cover for the alumni. So, he bounces one.
Yeah, see, look, things.
Never mind. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll lock
things are looking up. Things are looking up. I'm telling you, you're gonna get your plus 22. It's gonna end up covering for you. I'm feeling good about this one, Matt.
All right, good.
But anyway, so we've got everything sorted out with the start time. We've got the situation. Anthony Davis just rolled out, which is cool because we are going to be going into this slate with no real injury situations that are hanging over our heads, meaning there's nobody who's questionable. We know Anthony Davis is out. We know Mike Conley's out. We know Chris Paul is out. We're going to talk about the implications of the Anthony Davis injury in a second. But first, as an apology for myself to you guys, you could get access to all of the tools we have at Stokastic right now for $5 for the next week. All you have to do is sign up using the promo code THANKS at checkout, and you'll get access to player projections, ownership projections, tools for every single DFS sport out there for $5 for the next week. That is 90% off our normal deal. Now, did that deal exist before? Have you guys watched our shows, or is it an apology for the confusion about the start time of the show? Nobody knows for sure, but use the promo code THANKS when you check out there. Now, Matt, let's talk about Anthony Davis because he was just ruled out. And I don't know what to make of the Lakers injury reports this year because in the past, it was all fugazi. Anybody who's listed on the injury report, and it was we didn't have to take it all that seriously. It's different now. LeBron James is missing games. Anthony Davis, he's always liable to miss games. Before today, I kind of was under the impression earlier in the day that he was going to be playing. Not the case. He is out today. How does that impact, first starting with LeBron James, and then we'll talk about some of the potential cheaper options?
Yeah, LeBron becomes one of the best pay up options on the slate. I mean, we're talking, there aren't many of them. It's limited. You're really looking at him or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I had SGA as my preferred stud before the Davis news, but now I probably give LeBron a slight edge. I don't think that it's all of a sudden like LeBron becomes a smash must play type of guy. He's averaging 1.4 DraftKings points per minute with AD off the floor this year. So that's a slight uptick, but it's not crazy. So yeah, I think LeBron clearly gets a boost in value. After that, you can give a little bit of a bump to the big men. Thomas Bryant should see a few extra minutes. Same goes for Wenyen Gabriel. I think they become viable punt plays. Dennis Schroeder, I think not necessarily that he benefits from Anthony Davis, but he was kind of just underpriced to begin with at 3,800. That's really about it for me. If you wanted to throw Troy Brown Jr. in there, you probably could do that as well. But I think it's really the two big guys, Schroeder and LeBron James.
Yeah, so looking at some of the numbers that LeBron James has had, and I'm going to go back the last couple of seasons because just this year he hasn't played all that much. But taking Anthony Davis off the court, LeBron James, 34% usage rate, scores 54.32 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. He's going to play a really big role for this team, and it's a great matchup against the San Antonio Spurs. And the other thing you mentioned, which is obviously really key to this, we've basically got two guys to pay off for on the slate. It's LeBron James, who do us the courtesy.
LeBron James.
Exactly. So we got LeBron James, we got SGA. Same exact boat for me, by the way. I had SGA projected better, and now LeBron's the guy who's projected better. He's going to be a pay-up option. I get to a whole bunch. And by the way, at least relative to our current ownership projections, and let me check to make sure that we haven't had an update that's changing this. There isn't a big ownership gap between the two of them. At least there wasn't in the last time I refreshed it. And let's see if that is still the case. Yeah, so we've got LeBron right now projected for 33% ownership on DK. And then we've got SGA at 30%. So very, very minimal difference between the two. And actually over on FanDuel right now, SGA 45% on LeBron, 43%. I have LeBron projected a little higher. This isn't a thing where we have to weigh ownership massively because that looks about the same between the two. LeBron is my pay-up guy today. I'm totally cool going with that. Do you have a lean though? So I guess one thing we do have to wait on a little bit here. So with Anthony Davis out, we don't have that starting lineup for the Lakers. Who are you assuming starts at center?
It's been Wenyen Gabriel, right? I think he probably is the guy that I lean towards. But ultimately, again, it's a decision that doesn't really matter to me because I think both guys are going to play, 20-ish minutes. Maybe the guy who starts gets to like 24 or so. But I think both players are guys that you want to have exposure to.
Let's pull up the last time AD missed a game, which it's been a while for him. It's been nearly a month before the season started. Did come in with bold proclamations that he claimed he was going to play in all 82 games this year. It has not come to fruition. The last time we saw Anthony Davis out, it was Damian Jones who started at center. He played 23 minutes in that game. So not a massive workload. And if I remember correctly, he was somebody who was like 40% owned or something crazy on that slate. But one thing that was notable, that was before Thomas Bryant was back. And he's also in the picture now. So I do lean towards Damian Jones starting again. But to the point you made also, I think Damian Jones gets minutes. I think Wenyen Gabriel gets minutes. I think that we're going to see Thomas Bryant get minutes. And it's going to be really, really difficult to find any of them to be priorities for me. There's a lot of value on the Spurs side of this Lakers game. There's some other guys in the back where you mentioned Dennis Schroeder. I love playing Dennis Schroeder today. So if you take some shots on Thomas Bryant, Wenyen Gabriel, or Damian Jones, particularly Jones if he's starting, I think you can make a case for that. But I don't view any of them being priorities. My assumption is that Jones is going to start, but it's not a totally confident call either. But any of these guys that you would consider to be stronger plays than the other two.
I will say that if Damian Jones is not starting, he is not somebody that I am going to be playing. He's kind of been out of the rotation since Thomas Bryant came back. 4.5 minutes, 7 minutes, 1 minute over his last 3 games. So unless he's starting, I'm not confident that he necessarily cracks the rotation. I do think that Thomas Bryant is my preferred option of the bunch just because we've seen him before, during his tenure with the Wizards. He is a pretty solid per minute guy. And in limited minutes so far this season, he's at 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. So I think he's the best of the bunch on a per minute basis. And that would give him the edge in my eyes, especially if he's in the starting lineup. But I think he's my preferred option.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we should note when it comes to Damian. By the way, Damian Jones, I really don't know who's starting. I just kind of made that assumption because he started last game. I think you make a very good point though that he's falling out of the rotation, so that very well could not be the case for today. But somebody asked us a question in YouTube, which I think is a pretty valid one, where he said, try to. I think it was something along the lines of why we like LeBron more than SGA, but I like the way that he had framed it. And I can't find it now. All right. He said, okay, here it was. Black name. He said, I need you to convince me LeBron over SGA. Okay. So let's try to convince him because SGA clearly is a great matchup against the Houston Rockets. And a lot of this really comes down to Anthony Davis being out and the extra usage going towards LeBron. That's basically the entire crux of the argument. So I read off before the numbers that we've seen from LeBron this year, or the last 2 years when AD is off the court. So here's the baseline for SGA this year. He's averaging just under 52 DraftKings points per minute in 36 minutes. I think we're getting somewhere around 36 minutes today from LeBron. And once again, to reiterate, the last 2 years with Anthony Davis off the court, LeBron averaging 54.3 DraftKings points. So I have them close in projection, but I do have LeBron a couple points ahead. That's why he ends up being higher for me. But do you have anything you would add to that as to why it is LeBron over SGA for yourself?
Yeah, so I think like just thinking about it this way, SGA has averaged 1.41 DraftKings points per minute this season. LeBron has averaged 1.39. So now you're taking a legitimate like 30%, 28% usage type guy out of the equation. If you don't think that LeBron can get at least a tenth of a fantasy point boost in that scenario, like I think that's honestly probably a pretty conservative bump to give him. So yeah, that to me was the big difference. That's the reason that it pushed him over the edge.
Yeah. So, and once again, there's particularly if you guys are playing on FanDuel, the pricing is soft enough that you could certainly build lineups.
Yeah, just play both on
And
FanDuel.
yeah, very, very easy to do that. And for DraftKings, I find it a little more difficult to play both of them, but it's still viable to have lineups that are including both of them. Just if you're between one or the other, my preference is towards LeBron James. And my favorite value play on the Lakers, like you, it's Dennis Schroeder. So when it comes to Schroeder, he's playing a more expanded role for the Lakers. And does that really change with Anthony Davis being out? Not necessarily, but to what you said before, he's so drastically underpriced that it doesn't really matter anyway. We would have been playing Schroeder really no matter what, but there's a little more usage to go around for the Lakers. So to me, Schroeder is pretty clearly the best value play from the Lakers and the best value play overall on the slate, particularly for DK, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I give Thomas Bryant a slight edge now, but for sure, Schroeder's in the conversation.
And something else that I like about Schroeder, he's not projected to be all that popular, which I'm kind of confused by. We've got Schroeder right now projected to only be 18% owned, and I have him projected just far and away the best value play that we have going on the slate today. So to me, Schroeder 10% on FanDuel, 17% on DK. That's an oversight by the field. I think we should be loading up on that guy for sure. But any other Lakers players, just because that 3 games, not really that many key talking points sit on here. Any other Lakers that you would consider to be a priority for tonight's slate?
Not real, definitely not a priority. I mean, I like Austin Reeves. I think he should be playing more. But the fact that he's coming off the bench and is now up to 4,800, I don't think he's like you can use him in a tournament lineup here and there, but he's definitely not a priority. Same goes for Lonnie Walker. Russell Westbrook is a guy that we have in the past looked at when Anthony Davis has been out, but he played legitimately 19 and a half minutes in their last game. So I think that Westbrook might be getting relegated to a hard reserve role at this point.
Yeah.
So he's not somebody that I think you can play at 8,300.
Yeah, and the other thing too with Westbrook is he's actually been a better points per minute fantasy producer this year than he was last year. It just doesn't matter if the minutes aren't there. Points per minute production is great, but if somebody's going to be playing such limited minutes with the price up, kind of hard to get there. Super chat from Eric Traub. And by the way, anybody who has questions in the Discord chat, at me, we will definitely be able to hit on everybody's questions over the course of this show, considering it's a 3-game slate. And we've already got all the injury news in. Eric Traub, YouTube chat AD, better than Lakers AD. No disagreements for me. None at all. Now, look, AD, to his credit, has been really good when he's been on the court this year. Really one of the only bright spots for the Lakers this year. They've had three things this year. AD being relatively healthy today, notwithstanding, and actually playing really well. Russell Westbrook has shown to be serviceable off the bench, way more effective off the bench than I ever would have thought. And then there was Patrick Beverley tackling DeAndre Ayton the other day. Those are like the three highlights for the Lakers this year.
No respect for Mr. 50, 40, 90 Austin Reeves.
He's a good shooter, but it would, if he was to do that in the starting lineup while playing extended minutes, that would be something. But doing it, more reserve role and limited minutes, it's hard to say that's
I just feel like with the Lakers, we're looking for bright spots, like you gotta kind of grade them on a curve at this point.
Yeah. Well, they haven't been eliminated from the playoffs yet. That's a nice thing. Brian Sullivan, DK Largefield GPP. Would you play Gabriel and Bryant together? Not for today, I wouldn't, but do you feel differently?
I have no problem playing them together because, again, I think that the most likely scenario is one of those guys plays, mid 20s minutes and the other one plays low 20s minutes. I don't think that they're going to share the court really very much at all. They probably won't play together at all. So I don't think that they necessarily cannibalize each other's value. Maybe it caps your ceiling just a little bit because you're kind of eliminating the scenario where maybe one of the two gets in foul trouble or something and one guy gets a boost in minutes. But I think if you're just looking at value, I would play both guys together in cash. That's kind of how I would look at it for sure. And I think playing them together in a tournament is fine as well.
Here's the reason I disagree with it. We just don't have an abundance of guys to pay up for. It's not like I need to save as much salary as possible to try to get up to Giannis or Luka or something on this slate. Where it would have been different actually is if we had that first game of the slate included. That really would have changed how I approach some of these cheap guys. But at least for me, thinking that the minutes are going to be spread out and also the potential that Damian Jones could be in the rotation today, it's hard for me to really say I want to play the two of them together because I just don't think that they project as really well on the whole. If you're adding all their expected fantasy points together, I just don't think it's necessary. And then also there's a lot of cheap guys that I like getting to from the Spurs side of this game. And yeah, I don't think the salary savings give us a whole bunch today. I'm already playing a bunch of LeBron James without too much issue. I don't even know what I would do with the added salary savings. Yeah,
I mean, the answer is you play at LeBron and SGA together. I think that the way I have these guys projected, they have the two highest ceilings on the slate by nearly 10 points in my eyes. So if you think that that's a path that gets you to that lineup pairing, that's really the scenario where I would consider it.
Yeah, and we got some questions coming in. Yeah, I think that is certainly a reasonable point. But even then, I have some lineups that have both of them that aren't going quite that cheap. But now, once again, stuff could change if we find out that maybe both of them are starting together. Then I feel different about it. But at least as of right now, we've got it's probably I was coming in thinking it was going to be Damian Jones. You've talked me into Thomas Bryant most likely being the starter. And Gangrene does have a question for us about this. If Bryant starts, do you like him more than Pokashevsky considering the savings? Yes. Also, I don't really like Pokashevsky all that much today. The minutes for OKC, total nightmare to figure out. But yes, if Bryant's starting, I would like him points per dollar more than Pokashevsky.
I think that, yes, it's a clear answer for Bryant in terms of just pure value, but I love Pokashevsky in tournaments. I think when you talk about guys in his price range, he probably has the highest ceiling, in my opinion. He's so good on a per minute basis. He's played at least 29 minutes in 2 straight games. And yes, we can definitely get rug pulled and he plays 18 minutes tonight. But I just think that with the upside he provides at that price tag, playing him at his current projected ownership doesn't seem like a mistake in my eyes.
Yeah, I think he's certainly viable in large field tournaments. He is in 10% of my lineups right now. But if Thomas Bryant, we do get confirmation he's starting, I'll end up with more of him than Pokashevsky.
Correct, yes.
And part of it too is it is so difficult to project really anybody for the Oklahoma City Thunder other than SGA. Giddey, his minutes are relatively safe, and I do like him as an upside play in that upper mid range today. But these other guys, it's like, hey, Pokashevsky starts the first half, but then the second half he doesn't start, and it's kind of it doesn't even make a difference whether guys are playing well or not in the first half. Like, what percentage of games this year have the Thunder started a different lineup in the second half than the first half, and for no reason at all? It's been like 75% of them, hasn't it?
That I have no idea, but I will tell you that just from working the DK news desk, they start a different starting lineup every game. Every game there is a starting lineup change that needs to be reported.
And it's not just the starting line. It's like I said, also, they change lineups at halftime for no reason at all. For no reason. Like, yeah, we're going to go. I know that Jalen Williams is having the best game of his career, but we're not going to start him in the second half. It's just weird shit like that all the time. That does make it pretty difficult to suss out some of the minutes projections. DC24 has a question for us. Can you talk about Pirtle and Şengün minutes projections? Yes, we can. So starting with the San Antonio Spurs, I'll pull them up right now. So one thing that kind of muddles the minutes for both of these teams in the front court is that they get blown out a lot. And I wouldn't take too much of that into account too much. So also something else about this Spurs-Lakers game. Now that there is no Anthony Davis, the spread was already tight for the game. The Spurs are favored by 1 point. In the Oklahoma City-Houston game, the Thunder are favored by 2 points. Both these games should be competitive. We don't see all that many Rockets and Spurs games that are this closely lined when it comes to spreads. But if we look at Jakob Poeltl in some of the more competitive games, we've seen the minutes typically been in like that 28 to 32 range. And then there are times also where he has to sit a little bit due to foul trouble. So last game, for instance, he played 25 minutes, but also got in foul trouble, picked up 4 personal fouls. They were trailing late in that game as well, which played a factor. But as long as we see no foul trouble and no real blowout or anything like that, I think we're probably seeing, right around 30-ish minutes from Jakob Poeltl. So we'll start with him. Jakob Poeltl, any concern with his playing time?
I have him projected for 27 minutes at the moment. But I still think that that's enough to make him like a really interesting pivot off of DeAndre Ayton, right? Ayton's going to be the chalk at center. He's 7,200. Pirtle's going to command much lower ownership at 7K. And I think that the big difference between the two players is that Ayton is he's a little bit safer, right? The minutes are a little bit more secure. But from a ceiling perspective, I think they're very even. That to me is an optimal pivot type situation.
And then when we look at Şengün, so he missed last game. He's going to be back today, but Bruno Fernando's out. This is basically the same scenario because Bruno Fernando remains out that we've seen Şengün in now for the last month or so since starting. So Şengün recent games, 24 minutes, 28, 26, 30, 19. That was a game he fouled out in, 30, 29. Same thing. I think the minutes for these two are going to be very comparable today. I think that, give or take a minute or so, the playing time should be about equal. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I have Pirtle at 27. I have Şengün at 28. So
yeah, no, I think that that's probably about they're big men who both could be foul prone at times. So that's something that could be an issue. But overall, all things being equal in games, no foul trouble, no blowouts. We've seen these guys play upper 20s to low 30s minutes. Anthony Bitanti wants to know, fade Sexton and slam Schroeder then like 100-0. That's a little aggressive for me. I do prefer Schroeder in tournaments to Colin Sexton though.
Yes, I prefer him as well. I think he's a better value. But I am certainly playing Colin Sexton as well.
Yeah, so we look at, and he didn't specify a site when he asked there, but Sexton is $4,900, projected for 28% ownership. I totally understand why. I don't understand how Schroeder's only 18% owned on DK, $3,800. That's way too cheap of a price point for me. And if he's actually going to be half the ownership of Sexton, I'm getting to more of Schroeder than Sexton. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that means we have to fade Sexton. Like it's totally reasonable to have lineups that have both of them in.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how ownership changes here over the final hour. Like in the most recent set that we did, LeBron is now up to 40% projected ownership.
Oh, really?
It would not shock me if Schroeder comes up a little bit, but he's still down there at 18%, 19%. So Yeah, like you said earlier, that feels like a mistake that we should be taking advantage of.
Yeah, I just refreshed because there was a fresh set of ownership projections that I had not refreshed quite yet for. But yes, it does now seem like LeBron picking up a little bit more steam. Thomas Bryant as well project for 29% ownership. Gabriel at 26%. So LeBron now a little bit more popular than SGA, kind of more what we were in line with when we were first talking about them to start us off here. Now we've got another question from Seth. Seth, who's busy sharing leftover pumpkin pie with his wife's boyfriend, and they're wondering who is our favorite Spur not named Keldon Johnson.
That's a good one. That's a good question. I will give the edge to the guy that I have projected for the best value is Zach Collins, but I think Trey Jones is probably the answer for me.
Yes. So the two Spurs I have the most exposure to are Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones. By the way, I'm getting a ton of that game in general. I like Poeltl a lot at center. I think Jeremy Sochan is a good value option. Then obviously we've talked about how much we like LeBron and like Dennis Schroeder. So that's a game that I think is very stackable, not because I'm doing anything to force players from that game in. That's just how it works out for me to where I get to a lot of those guys in my lineup. So I really do like getting to that game, and hopefully there's overtime there because I would benefit a lot from that looking at some of my exposures right now.
Yeah. And this is not going out on a huge limb, but I think Keldon is just my favorite play on the slate at 6,800. I mean, he has shot the ball so poorly over the last 4 games. He's like 25% from the field and even worse from 3-point range. The guy is a much better shooter than that. Like such an obvious positive regression candidate. And he is catching ownership, right? Like it's not like Keldon Johnson is sneaking up on anybody today, but I think that it's just the perfect spot to buy low on him.
Yeah, I mean the role for him is going to be there all season because you just look at the Spurs roster and there's no reason to not have him be the go-to guy on that roster, particularly from a usage standpoint. But the other thing too is when it comes to that team is they're giving him days off here and there. They're giving everybody days off here and there. But the days where they actually play, I mean, these guys have been full go and we've seen some really big fantasy upside. But what's kind of good about the missed games is then guys come back and they're cheaper than they were before. So it's been really good from a fantasy standpoint. Actually, here's the interesting because you just mentioned Zach Collins, and Heflove says, should Zach Collins play all of the center minutes that Jakob Poeltl isn't playing? So let's see. Will he play all of the center minutes the Jakob Poeltl is in play? I think so.
Yeah, my answer would be yes.
And they also could share the court together for a few minutes. Zach Collins is, if I'm not mistaken, let me look up Zach Collins' 3-point shooting numbers. Collins is able to shoot the basketball unless I'm misremembering.
5 for 15 this season, 33%. Not a killer.
But I mean, 15 3-point attempts. I want to look back at previous years. All right. So Zach Collins. Yeah. I mean, you look at Zach Collins shot. Well, also he only played limited minutes. Boy, he gets hurt a lot. All right. So it's hard to really pull too much, but still 34% from 3 last year, 37% the year before. As far as big men go, he is capable of stretching the floor. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a 2 minutes per half or something, maybe where Collins and Poeltl overlap, which could benefit both of them a little bit. But overall, Heflove, yeah, I do assume Zach Collins probably plays all the center minutes that Poeltl doesn't. I think
yes, and I want to clarify, just because I know somebody's going to fact check me. 5 for 15 was over the past month. It's 7 for 25 for the full season.
Okay. There we go. So Matt has made sure that is clarified. Jordan 3124 wants to know how many Spurs is too many. Vassell, Jones, Keldon, Sochan all seem like awesome value. I have lineups with 4 Spurs players. I think that particularly because it's a 3-game slate, I think you could go with 4. By the way, we just got the Lakers starting lineup. Quick for you, 4 Spurs okay with you in lineups?
If I'm going to play 4 Spurs, I want to just stack the game fully, I think.
Yeah, which LeBron's already in a lot of my lineups anyway. It just happens for me.
Yeah.
Starting lineup, you were on the right side of this one, Matt. James, Dennis Schroeder starting, Troy Brown, and then we have Lonnie Walker and Thomas Bryant at center. So now that we know Thomas Bryant is starting at center, I think that he's pretty clearly the top value option of the Lakers big men. And you were already ahead of me on this one. So I assume you're going to agree with the point that you already made earlier.
Yes, but I just want to reiterate that doesn't mean that you can't play Wenyen Gabriel. I think Wenyen Gabriel is still very playable at 3,100.
Yeah, and I now think the Damian Jones, who I thought there was a chance he could start just because it's what the Lakers have done in the past when he was out. I think he's either going to be out of the rotation or just play incredibly limited minutes. So somebody who no real interest from me from that standpoint. Quickly, let's tell people how they can make some money. Easy money today, Matt. The easiest money possible. You sign up at our sponsor, BetMGM, and here's how you're going to get $200 for free from BetMGM. You click on the link that's about to be thrown into the YouTube chat, or it's also below in the comment section, below the YouTube box. You can click on that. And then you place a $10 money line bet on any World Cup soccer game, and it's going to pay you $200. Doesn't matter if that team wins or not. All that matters is if there's a goal scored in the World Cup, and there's already been a goal scored. So it's going to pay out $200. Just click on the link when you sign up. You head on over to BetMGM, place that $10 money line bet. You're going to make $200. Easy money. You will not find an easier way to make money this weekend in sports betting or in DFS. Any other takes circling back on the Lakers starting lineup now that Dennis Schroeder's in? His ownership has to skyrocket now, right?
I think he started in their last game too, if I'm not mistaken. So I was expecting him to start. He played 20. He saw a nice uptick in minutes 29. In their last game. I believe that was as a member of the starting unit. So not surprising to me.
But it seems like the field was not expecting him to start just based on that ownership.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the field is just kind of sleeping on him a little bit because he's been, kind of non-existent for most of the year. But second straight start, he played pretty well in his first start. Yeah, I mean, all systems go.
So we've talked about the Lakers and Spurs game pretty thoroughly at this point. And by the way, that is also where a lot of my guard exposure is. I have some to Colin Sexton as well, who we've already talked about. But just to round up the guards as a whole, who are the other guards as my browser crashes and everything goes away on my screen? Who are the other guards that you're getting a significant amount of exposure to outside of that Lakers Spurs game?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's really interesting for a 3-game slate is that every game has a total of at least 230 points and no spread is bigger than 6 points, right? So like all 3 of these games are very playable. I do agree that first game is the best one just because we've got some injury value now with the Lakers, but like you can play really all 3 games, I think, pretty heavily. I think Jalen Green and even Kevin Porter Jr. as like a pivot off of Green. I really like both of those guys in this Houston game. Jalen Green has been playing really good basketball of late. Kevin Porter Jr. is priced now at a point where I don't think he's going to be all that popular. He's coming off of a kind of a poor showing in his last game, but the 2 prior, he went for 50 plus. So I like both of those guys quite a bit. I think that now with all this value that's opened up, you can play Cam Payne. You can play Devin Booker. We've talked about Colin Sexton already. I think you can play Jordan Clarkson at 7,400. Like there's all the guards that are going to see the floor have at least some interest in my eyes.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull my lineups back up. And by the way, I hate when Firefox does this. Like, and it only happens at inopportune times. I've never been sitting at my computer and it just been me browsing the web and it decides to crash for me. It's only, hey, you're in the middle of hosting a live before lock show and you need to have this data in front of you. And then it pulls it for me. Let's see. All right, now I got it back up. I have to pull the YouTube chat back up as well. So I make sure to see everybody's super chats. But so for me, the guard that I'm getting the most exposure to outside of the Lakers Spurs game is Josh Giddey. He's somebody who for tournaments has such substantial upside because his box scores are so all over the place. Like he does not play towards his salary. He either plays well below it or well above it. So here are his last 5 games: 41, 25, 40, 46, and 21 fantasy points. Kind of ideal for tournaments because if you get the good game from him, he's way above his salary price point. If you get one of those shitty ones, he falls way below. But that's also kind of what's ideal for me on a 3-game slate like this. I like the potential upside from SGA. I like the matchup against the Rockets. This is one of the rare times we could really bank on the OKC having a competitive game. Just don't fuck me and change the starting lineup and take Giddey out at halftime. None of that nonsense. As long as that doesn't happen, I feel really good about Giddey's upside.
I think his role is pretty secure.
I mean, in a general sense, yes, but 2 games ago he played 29 minutes. There was a game last week he played 20 minutes where he didn't start the second half, and there was also a game 2 weeks ago where he played 23 minutes and didn't start the second half. So
all right then.
it only happens once every 4 games or so, but like once every 4 games, he just randomly doesn't start the second half and his minutes go down.
Wonderful. That's just fantastic.
And no real reason other than their coach is a weird conspiracy theorist who thinks that lineup changes give him some sort of edge, and he thinks the NBA is out to get him and fine him. He actually said that I'm pretty sure it was related to Josh Giddey in a game where they listed Josh Giddey as doubtful, and then he ended up playing, and I don't know, he had some kind of weird issue with the NBA about it.
Well, apparently that's why the Heat now release like 10 names on their injury report every game, is because they got in trouble for doing it once. So they said, well, you can't put us in trouble if we just do this every game, if we make this the status quo. And it's literally the most annoying thing in the NBA right now.
Do you know the other reason they do it?
Because Pat Riley is the devil.
No, because Jimmy Butler is always hurt, and he's made of he's made of just paper and just crumbles. That's the real reason. Like, what can you do? If your best player is always hurt, you have to list him on the injury report, and then the other players on the roster, that's where they take their lead from. They think they're supposed to get hurt because that's what their leader does. That's the real issue.
We're going to set up a charity cage match, Greg versus Jimmy Butler.
No. It is not for charity. I want all of the proceeds.
Okay.
There'll be none of that. I'm getting all the proceeds. John Good super chat. Thoughts on Şengün tonight? I think
meh for me.
Sorry, what was that?
That was a meh for me.
So the most recent ownership on Şengün, I think I'm about even with the field on him. I think that he's somebody to have in like 15 to 20% of lineups. And his current ownership projection is at, let's see, Şengün is he's in 19% of lineups right now on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, Şengün is projected for 20% ownership at 6,700. I think the field's right on this. I think he's pretty neutral as a play.
Yeah, I prefer Ayton and Pirtle, and obviously like now all the cheap guys. I'm pretty sure that my only Şengün exposure is going to come in like 2 center lineups.
I know we got, so related to the OKC and their dumb rotations, we got not a super chat, a question on our Discord channel from Steven Leibowitz. He says, do we care that Ousmane Dieng is going to get rotation time tonight, according to the coach? Not really, because it's going to come. First of all, I highly doubt it's going to be something significant. I think we're looking at like 2 4 to 5 minute rotations in each half for 8 to 10 minutes. Not anything that's going to, number one, be significant to himself, but also not enough to really take away from anybody who I think has actual upside. But what do you think of Dieng being in the rotation?
Don't care at all. I think my biggest takeaway is that Ousmane Dieng is just a dope name. Like I could see him scoring a hat trick for France in the World Cup for sure.
He could. It's a name. It's a name that could be a backup center in the NBA. You could score goals in the World Cup, and you could beat the shit out of guys in the UFC.
Yeah.
It's got a name that has a little bit of it's got flexibility to it. Could do a lot of things. Other guards that I'm getting to, by the way, just to round up the position, we brought up Sexton before. Devin Booker also. If you need a secondary star and don't have the ability to pay up for LeBron and SGA in lineups, Booker fits in pretty easily underneath. This is, I assume, his final game that he's going to play without Chris Paul. So I think it's one more time they could really push him for extra minutes, extra usage, and then they could dial back his role a little bit next week when Chris Paul's back in the mix. So Devin Booker, to me, is another strong pay-up option who makes it into my lineups. Anything else that you want to talk about at guard before we move on?
The one thing I will say about Booker, which is surprising, but not that surprising when you think about it, is that his usage rate has actually been down in games without Chris Paul this season. And the big reason why is because he's sharing the court now with Cam Payne. And Cam Payne is just a guy who's going to naturally post a higher usage rate than somebody like Chris Paul would. He's made up for it because he has been a better distributor. but I don't think that there is like this huge spike in value for Booker just because CP3 is sitting. He's fine. I have some of him, but like I am trying to get up to SGA like every time if possible.
Yeah, I get to more of Booker than SGA. I guess just the salary savings, the way it works out, and the fact that I like LeBron more. But I wouldn't have an issue with anybody saying they prefer SGA to Booker. Just for me, the way my lineups are shaking out, I'm getting to Booker a little bit more. A couple other questions that just came into the Discord channel. One from Mr. Moneybags. Any Porter Jr. love tonight in a DK GPP? Any other Rockets you like? I'm not prioritizing any of the Rockets. So he's asking love. I don't love any Rockets players. I get a little bit of Şengün. Jabari Smith is in some lineups. But no, nobody that I'd say I love. Do you have any individual Rockets players you love getting to today?
Love is a strong word. I will say that I have Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. I would expect to be overweight on both players. KPJ is somebody that just has a really nice ceiling for this price tag. And I still think Green is a little bit too cheap considering how well he's been playing. Green, particularly on FanDuel, that might fall into love territory, right? He's 6,900 on FanDuel. That might be a spot where if you are playing on that site, maybe he becomes like a priority type play. But on DraftKings at 7,500, he's more of like a secondary guard option.
Yeah. And by the way, something else that's kind of nice about Jalen Green, the assists have been there for him. So I know he's been incredibly inefficient so far this year. He closed the year out efficiently last year. I think we're going to start to see that come up a little bit. But look at the assist numbers in recent games. And this was something that I know Adams brought up a bunch of times over the course of the year, that Jalen Green's a really scoring dependent player. And that generally has been true. But the last handful of games, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. He's doing in other categories now. So now if we go back to, what is it? The last 2 weeks, he's averaging 5.5 assists, 5.5 rebounds per game. It's a guy who's starting to contribute in other areas, which is nice for a guy who had been so scoring dependent in the past. If you start to get production from in other ways, it's going to increase his ceiling, obviously, but the floor as well, because kind of now, if Jalen Green, if his shot hasn't been falling, you're basically dead rostering him because he's not contributing in other areas. It looks like he's rounding out his game a little bit. So particularly on FanDuel, so like you said, I think that does make sense. Anything to add there?
No, I think we got it all.
So yeah, anyway, no Rockets I love. I think love is a strong word. In general, I do love Jalen Green, just maybe not particularly for this slate. And then we've caught up on all of the questions in the Discord channel. Moving over to the forwards. We've talked about liking LeBron. We've talked about liking Keldon Johnson. Those are my 2 most rostered small forward / power forwards, LeBron and Keldon Johnson. Jeremy Sochan, somebody else who's making it into a good amount of my lineups, just a cheap player that we could play at the forward spot. There aren't that many cheap forwards that I really think have potential to be good points per dollar plays today. Sochan is somebody who I think is a young, talented player. I like the game environment. I'm already playing a bunch of guys from the Lakers and the Spurs. It just kind of correlates nicely. Are you going to try to talk me off Jeremy Sochan at all, or does that make sense to you?
No, I think that's fine. It does feel a little bit like point chasing because we've seen like basically no ceiling from this guy for the whole season. And then he pops off for 41 in his last game. But it's not all that surprising that a young player would get better as the season progresses. So, maybe if you wanted to make an argument, I would say that the 4 steals were a little fluky. And my other counterpoint would be that I now think that Wenyen Gabriel at 3,100 is a slightly better play. But I have Sochan in my lineup. I think he's fine. I'm not as interested in him as you are, it sounds like, but he's totally okay at 4,300.
Yeah. And it's him starting helps as well, right? Because we know that there's some sort of baseline for his minutes with him just being in the starting unit. And the minutes, at least as of late, more consistent than they were earlier in the year. The only thing that's kind of played against him is some of these blowouts, which does happen in a lot of Spurs games, but still the minutes now over the last 2 weeks, he's averaging just under 30 minutes per game. So for the season, averaging 25, but those have slowly trended up as the season's gone on. Early in the year, he had some starts where he played 21 minutes, 10 minutes, 23. That doesn't really happen anymore, barring blowout or foul trouble. Competitive games, we're seeing 30 plus minutes from him. Like last game against Lakers, 36 minutes from Sokan in that spot. So I feel pretty good about his playing time. Who are the other forwards outside of the players that we've talked about that you do really like getting to?
We kind of touched on Pokashevsky, but I think he's a really nice tournament play at 5,200. Jabari Smith is somebody I'm a little bit torn on. When we didn't know if the center, the Rockets center,
Şengün?
When we didn't know if Şengün was going to be in the lineup, I had Jabari Smith penciled in as like one of my favorite forward plays on the slate. Now that he is in, I've dialed back my exposure a pretty good bit, but I still think at 5,800, he has a path to upside, right? Like maybe he doesn't play 38 minutes again like he did last night, but we've seen him. He's getting more aggressive with the 3-point shot. He has 11, 9, and 8 3-point attempts in the last 3 games. If he has a night where he's knocking them down consistently and he pulls in his usual, 7, 8 rebounds, I think he can provide us some decent value at 5,800. So he's another forward that I like on this slate.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with that either. Let me look at the most recent ownership updates. Is there anybody that's picking up ownership at the forward spot that you don't agree with, Matt? Anybody you think is going over-owned or just way overlooked at the position? We did get an ownership update a couple of minutes ago. And actually, Thomas Bryant, now the chalk of the slate. Thomas Bryant projected for 44% ownership on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, he's projected for 21% ownership, where he's a little more expensive. But still, our guy, Dennis Schroeder, he's actually gone down in ownership.
Yeah, and there's a nice photo of Mr. Şengün, who I forgot his name for a brief second. The forward that, to me, there are a couple actually that are catching ownership that don't make a ton of sense to me. KJ Martin is projected right now for 17% ownership on DraftKings. Don't really get that. Like, yes, he erupted in their last game, but he had 15 rebounds in a game where the team was without their starting center. Like, if you think, and he also shot 10 for 13 from the field. If you think that he is repeating that, I have some valuable meta property that I would like to try and offer you. I also think that Lonnie Walker checking in at around 19% ownership feels aggressive to me. Like, he's still Lonnie Walker. I don't know how much he benefits from a usage perspective with Anthony Davis being out. He's still going to have to share the court with LeBron, with Russ, with Dennis Schroeder. Like, I never want to play Lonnie Walker when he is projected to be the 5th most popular forward.
Do you ever build lineups and just assume you've uploaded them and then realize you're just looking at lineups that you've not yet uploaded? That reality has just hit me. So I'm uploading my lineups right now to DK, because that's one of the pivotal parts of building lineups is you
have to submit them. It is true.
Although you can't leave that way. They don't just take your word for it at the end of the day. It's like, no, you don't understand. I came in first. Give me my money. I know it says that I min cash half my lineups and the other ones did not cash, but trust me, first place is where I should have come there. So I am uploading my lineups right now to make sure that gets done. Any closing thoughts for you at forward before we talk about the centers?
I think Mikal Bridges is somebody that might be a little bit overlooked tonight. Right now, we have him projected for, where is he? Did I not click on the right boxes? Anyway, he has displayed much more offensive upside this season than
15% on DraftKings for Bridges, and on FanDuel, he's at 23% at 7,400.
I think 15% is probably fair. That's about what I have him in right now, but I just wanted to give him a little bit of a shout out because we know that this guy routinely plays among the most minutes in the league, but he really has become a more aggressive offensive player. So he averaged 10.5 field goal attempts per game last season. He's had at least 17 now in back-to-back games. So I think that Bridges has displayed a level of ceiling that we haven't really seen from him in the past. So he's somebody that's on my radar that I just wanted to give a quick shout out to.
All right, let's move on and talk about the centers, starting with, I get why people are playing Thomas Bryant. I've got him in lineups too. Not as much as the field does, because I still think that there's potential for, number one, the Lakers to play small lineups where LeBron could just be the center. That's a possibility in some of these lineups. Wenyen Gabriel is going to play minutes off the bench. Damian Jones could play, 8 to 10 minutes or something like that, which would take away from some of these guys. I think Thomas Bryant, you should be playing him in cash games today. You should have him in some tournament lineups. The 45% seems very high to me. Do you feel the same way, or are you just on board with it?
It's tough for me to not get on board with it just because I think I have him around 50% of my teams right now. Like, I have him as the clear best value on the slate. I have him projected for 27.5 DraftKings points, right in that vicinity. And like at 3,500, that's incredibly valuable when you consider that it allows you to get to, some of these studs on this slate. I just think that with, his per minute efficiency, he's been so good this season. Again, small sample size, but we've seen it from his time in Washington too. Like, the guy can rack up fantasy points pretty quickly. And I think with Davis out, he's going to get to, like, I would say a minimum of 20 minutes. And if he gets to 20, he's not going to bust, knock on wood. And if he gets to like 25 plus, I think he finishes in the optimal lineup.
I think that number one, the minutes are, I think 20 is probably fair. I don't think you'd be too much below then. But even with that said, he's somebody who, yes, he's been a really good fantasy producer this year, but he's only played 16 minutes per game.
Yep.
It's been 3 games. Last year, though, and the last couple of years, he's been a well below a fantasy point per minute guy. 16 minutes and 15.5 fantasy points last year. The year before, when we saw him only play part of the year, but 27 minutes and average 26.5 fantasy points. So I don't know that it's a lock that he's just a guy who's over a fantasy point per minute. And sure, if he plays 20 minutes and gives you, 19 fantasy points, something like that, that would be great. I do question what his minute ceiling is, though. Like, I don't know he's going to be a guy that goes out and plays, 28 to 30 minutes or anything like that. And there's just other guys I want to work in. So I have 30% of Thomas Bryant right now. So that's a value play I like. But still like him. He's in 30% of my lineups, just not where the field is at, with him being in nearly 50% of the field's lineups. I personally, if it's a 1v1 that you guys are playing a utility spot or something like that, I'd rather play Dennis Schroeder than Thomas Bryant, especially with the discounted ownership. Like, that's the value guy I'm really getting behind.
Yeah. And this is one area that I definitely am trying to improve in my own game, is that I kind of get blinders sometimes for the value. Like, I see Thomas Bryant 3,500. I see my projections and I'm like, okay, this guy's a total smash. But, you've got to factor in the downside equation as well. So as usual, you're probably correct. I should not be playing, 50, 60% Thomas Bryant. Our boom bust tool has him in the optimal at around 32% of the time. So, yeah, perhaps I am being a little bit optimistic here.
Must play him in cash games. Totally agree with that. Play him in cash games. And by the way, if somebody's convinced that Thomas Bryant is going to play 28 minutes at center, by all means, go ahead and play him in all your lineups. Those aren't the kind of minutes that I'm projecting him for. It's possible I could be on the wrong side of it. I just don't think the upper ceiling of his minutes is going to be all that high. And it's the same thing I felt when Damian Jones started at center for the Lakers and we had him projected for like 65% ownership that slate. I felt the same way. I thought there was reason to think he was a really good points per dollar play. And he ended up being okay. I think he scored 16 fantasy points that slate or something along those lines. But it's just oftentimes with the other value plays that I kind of think are comparable, or guys who are picking up less ownership. Jordan 3124 says Vassell, Trey Jones, or Cam Payne for FanDuel. Choose one. That is Payne amongst those three.
Vassell,
Trey Jones, or Cam Payne.
Yeah, Cam Payne.
The next one here is from Matty T55. Johnson and Trey Jones or Clarkson. Trey Jones or Clarkson and Olynyk or Poku and Cam on FanDuel. So Trey Jones, Clarkson. All right. trying to Johnson and Trey Jones, Clarkson and Olynyk. Okay, so that is Johnson and Trey Jones for me. Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones. I was trying to. It was a 2v2v2, and I was trying to make sure that I had all the names correct in what I was reading.
All right, so one more time.
It's fine. It was confusing enough. I gave the answer there, but that was the one that was the side that I preferred was the first one. Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones was my preferred side there. I think we've got all of the super chats answered now, and I want to know now centers outside of Thomas Bryant. Who are the other players that are priorities for you at the position?
Zach Collins is somebody that was like my highest owned center that I've come back on a little bit. Kelly Olynyk at 5,400. The minutes have really been there for Kelly O recently. He just hasn't been scoring fantasy points the way that we're kind of used to seeing. So I'm going to keep riding him at his current price tag. And then Pirtle and Ayton are my pay-ups at the spot.
Yeah, so Pirtle we talked about before, and he's actually the guy who's coming in as my most rostered center, though I am a little bit spread out at the position. Pirtle, Thomas Bryant, Şengün, Jabari Smith, Ayton, Olynyk. This is the spot that I'm most spread out relative to other positions. Like I don't have a Dennis Schroeder who's in like a massive chunk of my lineups at center. I don't have a guy like LeBron that makes it into a whole bunch of my lineups. So I'm a little more spread out at center, which, ends up happening a lot, particularly over on FanDuel. We could only roster one center. So I think there's a number of guys to play here that are pretty good looking. But overall, my favorites, if you guys are cash games, once again, play Thomas Bryant in cash games. I'm just saying I'm a little underweight to field them in tournaments. And then I really do like Jakob Poeltl as well. Somebody who I just think the minutes, it seemed like there was some concern from people about it earlier. I'm not too concerned about Jakob Poeltl's minutes. And then I just like how he correlates with all the players I'm getting to from the Lakers and the Spurs game in general. Well, let's really quickly just round this up for everybody, Matt. We've got about 90 seconds to go until lock. Who are your most rostered players at each position? For me at point guard, it is Dennis Schroeder and Trey Jones. How about for you?
Yeah, Dennis Schroeder, Trey Jones, SGA.
Shooting guard for me is Dennis Schroeder and Josh Giddey.
For me, it's Dennis Schroeder and Colin Sexton.
Small forward, Keldon Johnson, and nobody is really particularly close beyond that.
Yep. Yeah, that's accurate.
Power forward for me is LeBron and Sokan. How about for you?
LeBron and Wenyen Gabriel.
And then center for me is Pirtle, Şengün, and Thomas Bryant.
Thomas Bryant, Zach Collins, and Pirtle.
Do we get one more super chat? Olrat is saying, Olrat. Okay, yeah. Sorry, my bad. Would you play Troy Brown 5%, maybe single DK? Yeah, if you have one lineup with Troy Brown, that's no issue. He's very popular overall for the slate. I have him in a couple of lineups, but not anything too crazy.
Yeah, I don't think Troy Brown is somebody you need to play, but if you want to play him, yeah, that's fine.
And we had one more super chat in here, but it didn't have a question attached to it. So I don't know what it was supposed to be. Somebody asked a super chat about. So by the way, this was my bad because before when I had when I had my browser crash, I lost some of the chat stuff that was up. But somebody asked us a question, A1 Andy, about Alexander Walker. Yeah, I think both Matt and I were on the same page in terms of Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a decent option on this slate, but we just prefer LeBron if you were only paying up for one guy.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yes.
Nickeil Alexander-Walker not playable on this slate.
Oh yeah, my bad. So I must have misread what it said. If this was I assumed that he meant SGA. Nickeil Alexander-Walker not playing him.
Yeah, I don't. Is he on one of these three teams?
So so what's funny? So Nickeil Alexander-Walker,
he is on Utah.
Yeah,
I'm not playing.
I actually thought he was potentially going to play a role this year. He's not in the rotation though.
Well, he did play 30 minutes in their last game. That's kind of surprising.
Yeah, but that was also, so if you look at him in general for the year, he has not been in the rotation though. Like, I think that was a total outlier.
Yeah, I hope so because I didn't play any of them.
Yeah. Also, the game. So in that game, the Sexton only played 24 minutes. Beasley played 20 minutes. I don't think I gave him. I have him for 10 minutes today. Maybe I'm just off on that.
Yeah, I have him for 8 minutes. So he's not somebody that even crossed my mind to play today.
He was a DNP coach's decision the game before. He's been a DNP coach's decision nearly every game this year.
Yeah, that's bizarre that he just came at it. Because, like, if he played 20, you can chalk it up as, oh, it was a blowout. He got some running garbage time. It's hard to get to 30 minutes with just garbage time. But, yeah, I'm of the mindset that that's just a one-game outlier. And if he does it again, then obviously we're going to have to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, so we'll see. I could be very wrong about the rotations there, but it's hard to think that him playing 30 minutes in that one spot after he's basically been out of the rotation the entire year is something that's just going to continue. There was a game that was kind of one-sided. We also had a bunch of foul trouble in that game as well, if I remember correctly, which played a role. But yeah, 2 games ago, he was a DNP coach's decision. And he's also not good.
He's not good, but he doesn't know that. Those are the best types of players in fantasy.
Let's wrap this up, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Sorry with the confusion on the start time. We had a weird NBA slate, 3 games with the game starting later. We appreciate all of you who showed up. If you haven't done it yet, one more time, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.